Kaneto Shindo was a Japanese film director, screenwriter, film producer, and writer who directed 48 films and wrote scripts for 238. His best-known films as a director include Children of Hiroshima, The Naked Island, Onibaba, Kuroneko, and The Last Note. His screenplays were filmed by directors such as Kenji Mizoguchi, Kōzaburō Yoshimura, Kon Ichikawa, Keisuke Kinoshita, Seijun Suzuki, and Tadashi Imai. His films of the first decade were often in a social realist vein, repeatedly depicting the fate of women, while since the 70s portraits of artists became a speciality. Many of his films were autobiographical, beginning with his 1951 directorial debut, Story of a Beloved Wife, and being born in Hiroshima Prefecture. He also made several films about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and the effect of nuclear weapons. Shindo was one of the pioneers of independent film production in Japan, co-founding his own film company Kandai Gakaikai with director Yoshimura and actor Teiji Toriyama in 1950. He continued working as a screenwriter, director, and author until close to his death at the age of 100. Early life. Shindo was born in 1912 in the Seki district of Hiroshima Prefecture as the youngest of 4 children. His family were wealthy landowners, but his father went bankrupt and lost all his land after acting as a loan guarantor. His older brother and 2 sisters went to find work, and he and his mother and father lived in a storehouse. His mother became an agricultural laborer and died during his early childhood. His older brother was good at judo and became a policeman. One of his sisters became a nurse and would go on to work caring for atom bomb victims. The other sister married a Japanese American and went to live in the US. In 1933, Shindo, then living with his brother in Onomichi, was inspired by Sadao Yamanaka's film Bangoku no Isra to want to start a career in films. He saved money by working in a bicycle shop, and in 1934, with a letter of introduction from his brother to a policeman in Kyoto, he set off for Kyoto. After a long wait, he was able to get a job in the film development department of Shinko Kaimar, which he joined because he was too short to join the lighting department. He was one of 11 workers in the developing department, but only 3 of them actually worked, the others being members of the company baseball team. At this time, he learned that films were based on scripts because old scripts were used as toilet paper. He would take the scripts home to study them. His job involved drying 200-foot lengths of film on a roll of 3 meters long and 2 meters high, and he learned the relationship between the pieces of film he was drying and the script he read. When Shinko Kaimar moved from Kyoto to Tokyo in November 1935, many of the staff, who were Kyoto locals, did not want to move. The brother of the policeman who had helped Shindo get the job in Shinko Kaimar was one of them. He asked Shindo to take his place, and Shindo got a job in Shinko Kaimar's art department run by Hiroshi Mizutani. For his work as an art director, Shindo trained under a local artist. He had a talent for sketching, which he used in scouting locations, since cameras were less often used in those days. Shindo discovered that a lot of people wanted to become film directors, including Mizutani, and he decided that he might have a better chance of success as a screenwriter. Screenwriter years. Shindo wrote a lot of film scripts, which were severely criticized by his friends, but he persisted. He submitted a script called Seichayo Shinata Haikasho about a farmer who loses his land due to the construction of a dam to a film magazine and won a prize of 100 yen, 4 times his then monthly salary of 25 yen. However, the script was never filmed. By the late 1930s, he was working as an assistant to Kenji Mizoguchi on several films, most notably as chief assistant director and art director on the 47 Ronin. He submitted scripts to Mizoguchi only for Mizoguchi to tell him that he had no talent for screenwriting, events dramatized years later in Shindo's debut film Story of a Beloved Wife. His first realized screenplay was for the film Nanshin Josei in 1940. He was asked to write a script by director Tomoe Uchida, but the script was never filmed due to Uchida's untimely military conscription. In 1942, he joined a Shochiku subsidiary, the Kowa Film Company, under the tutelage of Kenji Mizoguchi. In 1943, he transferred to the Shochiku studio. Later that year, his common-law wife Takako Kyuji died of tuberculosis. In April 1944, despite being graded class Celsius in the military physical exam, he was drafted into the Navy. The group of 100 men he was serving with were initially assigned to clean buildings. 60 of the men were selected by lottery to serve on the ship and then died in a submarine attack. 30 more men were selected by lottery to serve on a submarine and were not heard from again. 4 men were selected by lottery to be machine gunners on freight ships converted to military use and died in submarine attacks. The remaining 6 men cleaned the Takarazuka Theatre, which was then being used by the military, then sent to a camp where they were insulted and beaten. At the surrender of Japan, Shindo exchanged his uniform for cigarettes and made his way back to the Shochiku film studio at Afuna. The studio was deserted, and Shindo spent his time in the script department reading the surviving script. In 1946, with a secure job as a scriptwriter at Shochiku, he married Mio Shindo via an arranged marriage and bought a house in Zashi, intending to start a family. At Shochiku, Shindo met director Kōzaburō Yoshimura. According to film historian Donald Ritchie, this started one of the most successful film partnerships in the post-war industry, Shindo playing Dudley Nichols to Yoshimura's John Ford. The duo scored a critical hit with The Ball at the Andrew House in 1947. Shindo wrote scripts for almost all of the Shochiku directors except Yasujiro Ozu. Shindo and Yoshimura were both unhappy at Shochiku, which viewed the two as having a dark outlook on life. In 1950 they both left to form an independent production company with actor Teiji Tonoyama Kaindaiga Kaiukai, which went on to produce most of Shindo's films. Early career as a film director. In 1951, Shindo made his debut as a director with the autobiographical Story of a Beloved Wife, starring Nobuko Oto in the role of his deceased common-law wife Takako Kyuji. Oto became Shindo's mistress. He was married to his second wife at the time and would go on to play leading roles in almost all of his films during her life. After directing Avalanche in 1952, Shindo was invited by the Japan Teachers Union to make a film about the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Children of Hiroshima stars Nobuko Oto as a young teacher who returns to Hiroshima to visit her family's grave and find surviving former students and colleagues. It premiered at the 1953 Cannes Film Festival, being the first Japanese film to deal with the subject of the atomic bomb, which had been forbidden under post-war American censorship. Children of Hiroshima met with acclaim, but also with criticism for its sentimentality and, according to the producing Japan Teachers Union, for not being political enough. After this international success, Shindo made Epitome in 1953. Nobuko Oto is Jinko, a poor girl who must become a geisha in order to support her family, and cannot marry the rich client whom she falls in love with because of his family honor. Film critic Tadashi Imai said Shindo had inherited from his mentor Mizoguchi's central theme of worship of womanhood. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that Shindo's view of women blossomed under his master's encouragement, but once in bloom revealed itself to be of a different hue. Shindo differs from Mizoguchi by idealizing the intimidating capacity of Japanese women for sustained work, and contrasting them with shamefully lazy men. Between 1953 and 1959, Shindo continued to make political films that were social critiques of poverty and women's suffering in present-day Japan. These included Life of a Woman, an adaptation of Maupassant's Yunvei in 1953, and Dobu, a 1954 film about the struggles of unskilled workers and petty thieves that starred Oto as a tragic prostitute. Wolf 1955, based on an actual event of a money transport robbed by a group of men and women out of sheer desperation, failed due to its extremely limited release. Still, actor Tonoyama later called his role in Wolf his favorite of all of the director's films. In 1959, Shindo made Lucky Dragon No. 5, the true story of a fishing crew irradiated by an atomic bomb test at Bikini Atoll. The film received the Peace Prize at a Czech Film Festival, but was not a success with either critics or audiences. By this time, Shindo had formed an established stock company of actors and crew that he would work with for the majority of his career. These included actors Nobuko Oto, Teiji Tonoyama, and Shigeshi Uno, composer Hikaru Hayashi, and cinematographer Kiyomi Kuroda, who had been fired from the Toei studio for his political beliefs during the Red Purge of the early 1950s and lost a legal battle for reinstatement. International success. With Kaindaiga Kaiukai close to bankruptcy, Shindo poured what little financial resources he had left into The Naked Island, a film without dialogue which he described as a cinematic poem to try and capture the life of human beings struggling like ants against the forces of nature. Nobuko Oto and Teiji Tonoyama are a couple living on a small island with their two young sons and no water supply. Every day they board to another island to retrieve fresh water to drink and irrigate their crops. The film saved Shindo's company when it was awarded the grand prize at the second Moscow International Film Festival in 1961. Shindo made his first ever trip abroad to attend the Moscow Film Festival, and he was able to sell the film in 61 countries. After making two more films of social relevance, Ninchin in 1962 and Mother in 1963, Shindo shifted his focus as a filmmaker to the individuality of a person, specifically a person's sexual nature. He explained political things such as class consciousness or class struggle or other aspects of social existence really come down to the problem of man alone. I have discovered the powerful, very fundamental force in man which sustains his survival and which can be called sexual energy. My idea of sex is nothing but the expression of the vitality of man, his urge for survival. From these new ideas came Onibaba in 1964. Onibaba stars Nobuko Oto and Tetsuko Yoshimura's 14th century Japanese peasant women living in a reed-filled marshland who survived by killing and robbing defeated samurai. The film won numerous awards and the Grand Prix at the Panama Film Festival, and Best Supported Actress to Tetsuko Yoshimura and Best Cinematography Kiyomi Kuroda the Blue Ribbon Awards in 1964. After the 1965 Jidejiki drama Kyuto, based on a play by Junichiro Tanizaki, Shindo continued his exploration of human sexuality with Lost Sex in 1966. In Law 6, a middle-aged man who has become temporarily impotent after the Hiroshima bombing in 1945 once again loses his virility due to nuclear tests in the Bikini Atoll. In the end, he is cured by his housekeeper. Impotence was again the theme of Shindo's next film, The Beat, released in 1967. Gender politics and strong female characters played a strong role in both of these films. Tadashi said by contrasting the comical weakness of the male with the unbridled strength of the female, Shindo seemed to be saying in the 1960s that women had wrought their revenge. This could have been a reflection of post-war society, since it is commonly said in Japan women have become stronger because men have lost all confidence in their masculinity due to Japan's defeat. In 1968, Shindo made Kuroneko, a horror period film reminiscent of Onibaba. The film centers around the eventual mother and daughter-in-law pair played by Nobuko Oto and Kawako Teichai. After being raped and left to die in a burning hut by a group of soldiers, the pair return as demons who entice samurai into a bamboo grove where they are killed. The film won the Menashi Film Awards for Best Actress Oto and Best Cinematography Kiyomi Kuroda in 1968. Shindo also made the comedy Strong Women, Weak Men in 1968. A mother and her teenage daughter leave their impoverished coal mining town to become cabaret hostesses in Kyoto. They quickly acquire enough cynical street smarts to get as much money out of the predatory Johns as they can. Shindo said of the film, common people never appear in the pages of history. Silently they live, eat and die. I wanted to depict their bright, healthy, open vitality with a sprinkling of comedy. In the crime drama Heatwave Island, released in 1969, Otto is a former inland sea island farmer who has moved to the mainland in order to find work, but instead ends up dead. The film begins with the discovery of her corpse, which leads to an investigation that uncovers the world of narcotics, prostitution, and murder, in which many poor farmers had found themselves trapped after World War II. Live Today, Die Tomorrow. 1970 was based on the true story of spree killer Norio Negeyama, dramatizing not only his crimes but the poverty and cruelty of his upbringing. The film won the Golden Prize at the 7th Moscow International Film Festival in 1971. Around this time, at the age of 60, his second wife Miyu divorced him over his continuing relationship with Ottawa. Later career. From 1972 to 1981, Shindo served as chair of the Writers' Guild of Japan. Also in 1972, he directed Sanga about a shamisen player and her submissive apprentice, his second adaptation of a literary source by Junichiro Tanizaki after Akito. Shindo's 1974 film My Way was a throwback to films of his early career and an exposure of the Japanese government's mistreatment of the country's migratory workers. Based on a true story, an elderly woman resiliently spends 9 months attempting to retrieve her husband's dead body, fighting government bureaucracy and indifference all along the way. In 1975, Shindo made Kenji Mizoguchi, The Life of a Film Director, a documentary about his mentor who had died in 1956. The film uses film clips, footage of the hospital where the director spent his last days, and interviews with actors, technicians, and friends to paint a portrait of the director. Shindo also wrote a book on Mizoguchi, published in 1976. In 1977, The Life of Chikizan was released, about the life of blind shamisen player Takashi Chikizan. It was entered into the 10th Moscow International Film Festival. That same year, Shindo traveled to America to film a television documentary, Document 8.6, about the Hiroshima atomic bomb. He met Paul Tibbets, the pilot of the plane which dropped the bomb, but was not able to interview him on film. The documentary was broadcast in 1978. In 1978, after the death of his ex-wife, he married Nobuko Otowa. The domestic drama The Strangling was shown at the 1979 Venice Film Festival, where Nobuko Otowa won the award for Best Actress. Ida Porn, another film based on an artist's biography released in 1981, portrayed the life of the 18th century Japanese wood engraver Katsushika Hokusai. In 1984, Shindo made The Horizon, based on the life of his sister. The film chronicles her experiences as a poor farm girl who is sold as a mail-order bride to a Japanese American and never sees her family again. She spends time in an internment camp for Japanese Americans during World War II and lives a life of difficulty and disappointment. With the 1988 semi-documentary Sakura Taikaiu, Shindo once again returned to the theme of nuclear weapons and their consequences following the fate of a theater troupe whose members were killed during the bombing of Hiroshima. According to his son Jiro, Shindo gave up his hobbies of mahjong, shogi, and baseball at the age of 80 to concentrate on filmmaking. Shiro was the producer of many of his films since the mid-1980s. Hei Shindo, Jiro's daughter and Shindo's granddaughter, later followed in Shindo's footsteps as a film director and scriptwriter. During production of Shindo's film A Last Note, Nobuko Otowa was diagnosed with liver cancer. She died in December 1994 prior to the film's 1995 release. A Last Note won numerous awards, including Best Film Awards at the Blue Ribbon Awards, Hoche Film Awards, Japan Academy Prizes, Kaima Jumper Awards, and Mainichi Film Awards, as well as awards for Best Director at the Japanese Academy, Nikon Sports Film Awards, Kaima Jumper Awards, and Mainichi Film Award. Final films and death. After Oto's death, her role as lead actress in Shindo's films was taken over by Shinobu Otake, who would star in 4 of his films. In Will to Live 1999, a black comedy on the problems of aging, Otake played a daughter with bipolar disorder of an elderly father who has fecal incontinence, played by Rentaro Mikuni. In 2000, at the age of 88, Shindo filmed by player A Biography of Actor and longtime associate Daichi Tonoyama, incorporating aspects of the history of Shindo's film company, Kaindaega Kairukai, and using footage of Oto shot in 1994. The 2003 owl, again starring Otake, used as a background the true story of farmers sent back from Japanese colonies in Manchuria to unworkable farmland at the end of the Second World War. The entire film was shot on a single set, partly because of Shindo's mobility problems. It was entered into the 25th Moscow International Film Festival, where Shindo won a special award for his contribution to world cinema. In 2010, Shindo directed Postcard, a story of middle-aged men drafted for military service at the end of the Second World War, loosely based on Shindo's own experiences. Postcard was selected as the Japanese submission for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, but did not make the January shortlist. Due to failing health, Shindo announced that it would be his last film at its premiere at the Tokyo International Film Festival. For the last 40 years of his life, Shindo lived in a small apartment in Akasaka. After the death of Nobuko Otoe, he lived alone. Although he had been able to walk all over Tokyo in his 80s, he lost mobility in his legs in his 90s. Because of his need for care, Kei Shindo moved into his apartment and lived with him for the last 6 years of his life, acting as his caregiver. Kei Shindo appears in the credits for Shindo's later films, credited as Kantoku Kenko Kanri, Management of Director's Health. From April to May 2012, a committee in the city of Hiroshima presented a tribute to Shindo to commemorate his 100th birthday. This event included screenings of most of his films and special guests such as Shindo himself and longtime admirer Benicio del Toro. Shindo died of natural causes on 29 May 2012. According to his son Chihiro, he was talking in his sleep about new film projects even at the end of his life. He requested that his ashes be scattered on the Sukino Island in Mihara, where The Naked Island was filmed, and where half of Nobuko Otoe's ashes were also scattered. Style and themes. Shindo said that he saw film as an art of montage which consists of a dialectic or interaction between the movement and the non-movement of the image. Although criticized for having little visual style early in his career, he was praised by film critic Joan Mellon, who called Onibaba visually exquisite. When interviewed by Mellon after the release of the film Kuroneko, Shindo stated that there was a strong Freudian influence throughout all of work. The strongest and most apparent themes in Shindo's work involve social criticism of poverty, women, and sexuality. Shindo has described himself as a socialist. Tadashi Soto has pointed out that Shindo's political films are both a reflection of his impoverished childhood and the condition of Japan after World War I, stating that contemporary Japan has developed from an agricultural into an industrial country. Many agricultural people moved to cities and threw themselves into new precarious lives. Kaneto Shindo's style of camera work comes from this intention to conquer such uneasiness by depicting the perseverance and persistence of farmers. Women and human sexuality also play a major role in Shindo's films. Joan Mellon wrote that at their best, Shindo's films involve a merging of the sexual with the social. His radical perception isolates man's sexual life in the context of his role as a member of a specific social class. For Shindo, our passions as biological beings and our ambitions as members of social classes which give specific and distorted form to those drives, induce an endless struggle within the unconscious. Those moments in his films when this warfare is visualized and brought to conscious life raise his work to the level of the highest art. Influences. When asked by Benicio del Toro what the most important thing he had learned from Kenji Mizoguchi was, Shindo replied that the most important thing he had learned from Mizoguchi was never to give up. According to Shindo, although Mizoguchi made more than 80 films, most of them were boring, with only about 5 or 6 good films, but without the failures there would never have been successes like Yugetsu Monogatari. Awards. 1961 Grand Prize at the Second Moscow International Film Festival for The Naked Island. 1964 Grand Prix at the Panama Film Festival for Onibaba. 1971 Golden Prize at the 7th Moscow International Film Festival for Live Today, Die Tomorrow. 1996 Japan Academy Prize for Director of the Year for A Last Note. 1998 Person of Cultural Merit. 1999 Golden Street George at the 21st Moscow International Film Festival for Will to Live. 2002 Order of Culture. 2003 Japan Academy Lifetime Achievement Award. Direct. Shindo wrote the scripts for all the films he directed. He is also credited as art director for Ninjin, Onibaba, and our 1951 Sorry, But Beloved Wife, 1952 Avalanche, 1952, 1953 Epitome, 1953 Life of a Woman, 1954 W, 1955, 1956 Yurigin Shinji, 1956 Uri no Tishi, 1956, 1957 Yubino Domo, 1958 Soro the Zone for Women, 1959, 1959 Haneyo and San Wasaka, 1960, 1962 Ninja, 1963, 1964, 1965, 1966, 1967, 1968, 1968, 1969, 1970 Strange Affinity, Chinese Little Letter, Shikopri, 1970, 1972 Kanoman, 1972 Sada, 1973 The Old, 1974, 1975, 1977, 1978 Documented 6 Japanese Letter, the AGHT.6 Documentary, 1979 The Strangling, 1981 Ediport, 1984, 1986 Ryukyuboda, 1986 Tree Without Leaves, 1988 Akira Taikaiu, 1992, 1995, 1999, 2000, 2003, 2008 T-shirt and 3 Children, 2010. Scriptwriter selected. Scriptwriter selected. Not including films, he also directed 1947 Tekken, 1947 A Ball at the Andrew House, 1948 Iwapi, 1949 Mogakoi wa Mauna, 1951 The Tale of Genji, 1956 Okoroshi Ten no Mati, Chain no Mati, 1961 Okoroshi, 1962 Kirotaka's, 1962 The Graceful Brood, 1964 Manji, 1966 Atabuchi's Pilgrimage, 1966 Fighting Elegy, 1971 Battle of Okinawa, 1971 Amino Nokanot Shimamura, 1972 Under the Flight of the Rising Sun, 1972 Rika Chinese Letter Japanese Letter 1973 Rika 2 Lonely Wander Chinese Letter Japanese Letter Japanese Letter Chinese Letter 1973 Rika 3 Juvenile's Lullaby Chinese Letter Japanese Letter Japanese Letter Chinese Letter 1978 Incident 1979 Okoroshi TV Series 1987 Achiku Monogatari 1999 The Jisha House. Writings in Japanese except where noted otherwise. A biography and recollection of Kenji Mizoguchi, a collection of essays about scriptwriting, a collection of newspaper articles reprinted as a book, a collection of essays.